Welcome to Spies and Spy Masters Happy Hour. I'm Amanda Olkey, the Director of Adult Education at the International Spy Museum in Washington, D.C. Happy early Valentine's Day. Tonight, we're excited to host the spy who Lily and Mike Susong. Hi, Mike and Lily. Thanks for joining us. Mike is a former CIA operations officer who was awarded the CIA's Intelligence Star for heroism in the field. We'll hear more about Mike's career and how he and Lily, an accomplished Russian specializing in executive assistance, ended up as guests for a spy romance-themed happy hour soon. But first, if you've been here before, you know we're going to take you on a little voyage of exploration. Hannah has made another one of her terrific videos, and we are going to see the Spy Museum through the eyes of a romantic. Let's see what what she has stitched up for us. So we'll do a cheers. Cheers to everybody. That espresso martini or water or coffee. So Hannah did a great job of showing that there is romance at the Spy Museum, and I'll let you all know at least one of those images came from a Kirk Douglas movie about the Gunnerside sabotage operation. So that's a scavenger hunt for the next time you visit the Spy Museum. And Hannah also set up a lot of cool Russian decor around the drinks. And Lily, you had some comments.
I'm much less prepared. I do not have as many Russian artifacts, but I guess I have an excuse. I am one myself.
So Hannah really went to town with the Russian artwork and the background, which was really incredible. So now that we've got our drink together, let's go over to Mike and Lily. And first of all, we'd love to set the scene for this spy rom-com with some background. Mike, can you tell us a little bit about your career in intelligence? How did you come to be a spy?
Sure. It's I think in most cases in life, the route's a little circuitous and it's not always a straight line. So I'd spent some time in the military as a special operations officer and as an infantry officer. And those who go back in contemporary history can remember what I refer to as the Reagan Wars in Central America. And had occasion to work, imagine, with other intelligence organizations there. Later went to Fort Bragg, again, the home of special operations, as well as the 82nd Airborne, which is in the news now. And afterwards had the opportunity to join the Central Intelligence Agency as an operations officer. And as everyone can read, there's various paths within the agency, but I stayed within the operations area. Most people who are knowledgeable refer to it as being a case officer. And in the simplest terms, my job was to recruit spies and to steal secrets. Afterwards, the government service, I went into the private sector and founded a cyber intelligence company. And upon selling the company, I still stayed active in the security business. And a lot of international companies have business in Russia and the former Soviet Union. And I had occasion to travel to Moscow, and as fate and luck would have it, I had occasion to run across a very competent, beautiful lady named Lily.
All right, Lily. So Mike has told us how he got to Moscow. So what were you doing up until the point where you met him in 2017?
Not a straight path for me either. I would say I had somewhat eclectic career with a dream of being a diplomat and making it on the international relations scene. But the Diplomatic Academy of Moscow was not admitting students that did not have a first degree, a prior different degree from a different university. It was more like requalification. So I got my first degree in English language, my first master's, and then I moved on to the Diplomatic Academy to graduate with a degree in international relations in the hope to still go to the ministry. Made it to the ministry, had to quit that career before it actually started. Due to personal reasons, my father was ill and I had to support the family. So I made a complete turn and went to business, international law firms, because what do you do when you have a career in diplomacy and have English language as your professional tool? So I thought international law was the place, and it was for a few years. And then I moved to security and cybersecurity, and that's where Mike and I crossed paths.
So here's where I get really nosy, and if you know me, it's just going to get worse. But, how does a former U.S. intelligence officer and a beautiful Russian undertake a courtship?
It's always a challenge. And to be perfectly frank, when we first met, Lily was the executive assistant to the CEO. I was over there to give some counsel on entering the U.S. market. As I always conclude, everything was professional and untoward, but we just met in passing, frankly. And then over time, luckily, I would say, with WhatsApp and other ways to communicate in Zoom, for an example, you're able to strike up a conversation, and as many romance and as many relationships do, it kind of evolved over time. I would say, and Lily and I'll chat more during the hour, her superior command of the English language and being westward facing, if you will, both her education outside of Russia, as well as for an international company that she worked for, it was not kind of the hard leap, as if it was someone who was very Russian centric or someone who was very American centric, and that goes for me. I'd spent a career, if you want to be a little facetious, looking at Russia as the enemy, but as a good intelligence officer, being realistic about the country and its strengths and the culture. So actually, we discovered that there was a lot more intersection than you might imagine first blush.
And we chatted about this as we were shaping the program. During the Cold War, this relationship that you two have would have faced a lot of hurdles. And how about for you two in the 21st century? I mean, did anyone cast a glance askance at this budding romance, or?
I think more people than we know of cast all sorts of glances, but I always say it's a relationship, not a community project. Speaking of the hurdles that a Russian-American couple would have faced a little less than a decade ago, there were many, and I would recommend anybody who is interested in the romantic scene between Russia and America, and how a Russian-American couple coexists. I would absolutely recommend you read a book by Lynn. She is a former United Nations translator, and I only knew her through her professional work on translation and interpretation. And recently I stumbled upon a book which is called Wedded Strangers, where she speaks about how Russians and Americans, despite all the differences and despite the nations viewing each other as rivals or enemies or wherever the focus would lie, still follow the curve of the heart and created an international relationship on a private, very private arena.
Well, and Mike, and you talked about this a little bit as an intelligence officer. How did your background studies of the Soviet Union, and you mentioned cutting your teeth a little bit on the end of the Cold War period, how did that prepare you for this life together with a Russian?
It seemed incongruous, right? The Central Intelligence Agency officer and a very well qualified professional Russian lady. But as Lily said, and as we're discussing here, and I think on the 14th of February, it will loom large in people's life, a romance takes its own path, and you find common ground, and you find common respect with each other. And that part is very human and apolitical. But as a professional intelligence officer, as I said, you have an objective look of the world. Lily and I think one of the strengths of our relationship is our honesty and trust with each other. So that kind of transcends all the other hurdles that might be obvious. And frankly, I'd left the service, and all my activities were appropriate and transparent. And as I said, that whether you're in the U.S. or in Russia, the last thing you want is the services to become suspicious. So as long as you're living your life, openly and professionally, and you're meeting with Lily's organizations, appropriate international companies, you'll get a glance. The services will give you some consideration, but when they see everything is above board, they have bigger fish to fry.
And I want to just ask you a little question before I jump into my next one for Lily, but your watch, we're always told, you're watched when you're traveling in Moscow. And did you notice that, Lily, when you started going out with Mike? Did you get some additional followers?
No, I wouldn't say so. I think a lot of people who are still maintaining a little paranoid view of being followed and wanting to focus on that aspect of a relationship or of knowing a spy, they would obviously look for somebody who would follow them or watch them closely. Mm-hmm. For me personally, I would say no organization looking at you or wanting you to be above board presented any problem. Family and friends, however, did. That's a big thing, explaining somebody that, my husband is an ex-CIA officer. And people going, what?
Well, maybe that leads into my question, which is, what's the craziest thing about being married to a former spy?
Well, exactly that, explaining it. I remember how I was setting the scene to introduce Mike to my family. And, I'm explaining what this is all about and who he is professionally and what his background is. And there is that complete silence, just silence. And my parents are watching me very closely and they go like, what do you mean? And to give a little more context, my parents are from a Soviet generation that was not at all exposed to any foreign people at all, let alone CIA spies. So I think for them, it sounded a little crazy and they had to take a little bit of a break to come to terms with what we are as a couple. And that is really, that this is true.
Yeah.
one of our favorite frequent guests commented that he supposes the FSB has nothing on an in-laws interrogation. So
that's a good point. And I love Lily's parents dearly. And as we joke, she had classic Soviet parents. Her mother is a PhD in Russian literature, and her father is an aviation engineer.
I was really that model kid from a Soviet textbook written by Soviets for Soviets, to teach English, which is a little bit of a weird concept nowadays, where if you want to study a language, you use the source, something produced by the native speakers, by the country. But in my time, when I was studying the language, it was all Soviet textbooks. And they, like, every little text would start with, Mary is, I'm making it up, 6 years old. Her mother is a teacher, her father is an engineer. And I was that Mary, because my mother was a teacher and my father was an engineer.
when you said that I wanted an example, I was just wondering what was Mary's behavior like? Was she?
She was always on duty, and she had to write something on the blackboard. It was still the blackboard back then. And I actually hope to lay my hands on my Soviet textbook one day, because I have all sorts of those cute little artifacts of the time, the time gone completely, but I still retain that. So that would be nice to see.
One of the most endearing things with Lily is we've in her parents' apartment and going through photographs of her and her Soviet school uniforms and the bows.
And the bows, yeah.
They're cute.
It is funny the things that we take for granted, how enchanting or unusual they are when someone from the outside looks in.
Even for myself, because again, speaking about me personally, I come from the generation that started in the Soviet Union, and then the country collapsed. So even for me as a Russian, that is a relic of the time gone. And this is something which is harder to explain to somebody from a younger generation. And my generation is walking that tightrope where our Soviet parents cannot completely relate to us, and somebody who is just a little younger already does not have their own memories of what it was like in the Union. And I'm straight in the middle.
Well, this leads into, we had some fun talking to you, and you mentioned some really interesting commonalities and understandings that you shared culturally that might surprise our watchers and listeners.
Yeah, Lily touched on it, and as we started our life together in the COVID world, which is certainly a test and an intense time for a marriage, which is good in all regards. But we would start to talk about maybe music.
I think it actually started in the candy shop.
Oh,
we were in the candy shop because we live in Pigeon Forge, which has a lot of tourist big shopping malls and stuff. And in that candy shop, there was that cigarette gum.
Yeah,
like gum candy, whatever it was.
Yeah.
Made out like a cigarette. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was the first to spot it, and I go like, oh my God, I had that as a child, and that was like, wow, that was such a cute thing to remember. And Mike goes, well, I had that as a child.
So kind of what we discovered was things that were in popular culture in the States, and then the Soviet Union and post-Soviet Union, there was a bit of a lag. So something that was contemporary or a fad in the States in one decade may lag behind a decade or so. So we've discovered a lot of commonality in candies and music and culture that kind of overlap. So it's made it kind of pleasant. We kind of have a shared background, even though it was at a different time.
I know we'll talk about movies a little bit later, but was there one show or movie that you were like, wait, you like that too? Did you have one of those?
Not really.
Yeah, I think a lot of maybe the contemporary shows weren't, because I guess it would involve dubbing. And so obviously there were some that were dubbed more What
Well,
was
see,
it?
when I
Santa
tried
Barbara? Santa
yeah.
Barbara?
Something that appeared to be a thing in passing in the States, just one of many, happened to be the series that apparently got dubbed in Russia. And that was the huge thing. Like everybody watched it. And I know a lot of Russians who travel to the States and who happen to be in that part of the country make a trip to Santa Barbara. And everybody inevitably says, oh, well, there is nothing to see really save for those iconic arches, which used to be in the lead to the show. I never watched it, by the way, but as a Russian, I feel it makes part of my background, even though I haven't watched an episode.
But if you went to Santa Barbara, you'd take a photo of those arches, wouldn't you?
I absolutely would, just for kicks. Yeah. And
Yeah.
it was so funny when I was explaining it to Mike that was a big thing in Russia, and he could not remember what it was. And I was like, what you mean it's not popular in the States? Not as popular as it was for me and my countrymen?
It was kind of one of many of those evening soap operas, you know, Dallas and Falcon Crest and everything else.
But I would say now we absolutely synchronize these two countries, and whatever Hollywood produces, we get pretty much same day. So, you know, again, this is one of those cute little things which are impossible now, impossible to imagine, because now everything is so concurrent. And for me, everything was with a bit of a lag.
Well, one thing that was really nice that you were telling us about was the dachas and like country life, and that commonality.
It's a commonality and a difference, because a dacha is a country house that a Russian family would have, likely not too far away from the city apartment that they own and where they are permanently based. But for summer, they would either move to the dacha, not unlike some New Yorkers would go to Catskills, right? That's the closest reference, probably, unless you can come up with a better one.
That's a good one.
Yeah, and you know, stay there for summer. My family had a dacha very close to Moscow, so my parents just continued to commute to their city jobs. So that is country life of sorts, but not really, because it's not your permanent house. It's not like a farm or just a cabin in the woods that an American would relate to. It's a different concept. It's just a summer house that you go to. So in a way, it does prepare you better for a context of owning a house, a home with a little bit of land. But the difference is still so big that, you know, I don't think I could compare the two, you know, earnestly. Yeah. Could you?
I'll make a comment about the dachas. Lily's family dacha, it's so, you know, as an American, the concept of the dacha is kind of mystical, and it's a lovely place. And it's a generational, what, your grandparents first?
My grandparents got it.
Her grandparents, as you understand the concept, worked all in the same factory. That plot of land was designated to the employees of that factory.
Everybody knew everybody.
Yeah, and that's a lovely thing. So the same, you know, hopefully if you got along with everybody, but the same people you worked with and lived near, probably, you know, then they were neighbors in the dacha. So as Lily has many times said, the kids that worked with their family were there. So there was a sense of community. Of course, now over time, dachas are sold and things, but it's a love, to me, it was always a lovely, empowering concept of that shared ownership.
The most relatable thing for Mike would be canning.
That's what I was
part of dacha activity, and what you know why you want to have a dacha, because then you can can, and then you have all those jams and pickles and whatever you produced and exchanged with your neighbors. So because Mike is from the South and that's a Southern thing to can, I think for him that was something instantly recognizable and instantly relatable.
And I got a few points with your parents. I think I sent pickles and blueberry jam. So
I got the pickles.
Oh, you got the pickles.
I just brought them the jam.
That was definitely.
I love pickles. Yeah, so I nicked that one.
That was the thing I was laughing about, that Mike's like canning, putting up preserves, bottling fruits and vegetables and pickling things. So interesting but you know, it makes sense that food built a bridge. So we're gonna take a little, we've got some really interesting questions queued up from the audience. But first, we're going to take a fun photo break. So it's not just like me grilling you, which I love doing, but Hannah's got a glorious array of your personal images that you were so kind to share with us. And tell us, you know what lies beneath these. Tell us what you'd like to share with us.
Let's start with Lily. I love her photographs.
Oh, you start then.
Okay. There we go. Lily can elaborate, but the bottom left and top right, if I'm looking correctly, are inside the Moscow metro, which is, if you haven't seen it, and I think later there'll be an opportunity to see a short video, is absolutely gorgeous. There's nothing in the world that rival
I will just
the metro.
break in for a second. Moscow Metro is truly unique. And every station is different. It's a different style, it's different architecture. Obviously, there are older and newer stations, which just adds to the charm. And I don't remember how many we have, but Moscow Metro is truly huge. It's a sprawled out system, which works like clockwork because trains would go like every minute. But it's truly, truly beautiful. You can see that there is some artwork and some sculptures behind me in the photographs. And when I had to take the metro here in Washington, D.C., we go downstairs and Mike tells me, well, like all the stations are the same. You've seen one, you've seen them all. And I go, what do you mean the same? So that's the biggest difference. They are very different for us.
We were hoping to take everybody on a field trip to the metro that Lily sent us. A dear friend of hers has a really cute video starring her, and it was too tricky to share. We're going to send that out in the thank you everyone afterward. It's only about 2.5 minutes long, and you will really enjoy it, and you'll feel like you took a refreshing mini journey into the Moscow metro. So wait for that'll be your after treat. And what else? All right. Any other comments you want to make about these glory? Tell me where the Christmas scene is before we disappear from this group.
Well, the top left one, that would be Christmas. Actually, New Year, more like it, because that's one of the underlying big differences in American life and Russian life. We celebrate Christmas, but it's Orthodox Christmas, which is on 7th of January, and New Year is a bigger holiday. So like me not being Christian Orthodox, I don't really care for Russian Christmas. But New Year is celebrated by everybody throughout the country, and regardless of your religious views. So the more accurate way to present that photograph would be a New Year seen in Moscow. But yeah, I realize it looks Christmassy.
I'm just using my cultural bias. It's very bad. Very bad.
Not at all. You'll also notice more fur. She has some lovely furs.
Yeah.
The one picture up in the corner where she's rubbing the dog's nose, and you can see how shiny the brass is. That's in one of the stations, and it's good luck. So people come by, all the commuters, many of them, as they walk by, they rub the dog's nose.
I love that. All right, back to the home screen. Let's see where we'll go. Where should we go next?
Well, above, just the Spy Who Loved Me there. Oh, that's a cute one. I will brag on Lily that she is an excellent cook, and she has completely embraced the American cuisine. As you can see, an apple pie, which is delicious, and I have the pounds to prove it. And as we joke, when she outfitted her kitchen, she needed all the appropriate accoutrements. So we have what I refer to as the damn red KitchenAid. So we got her a KitchenAid mixer, but I benefit from it. So we're quite happy with that arrangement.
Everybody loves those.
And that was a big thing for me, to make an American apple pie, and then share the recipe with my friends so that they can have a taste of the country, because arguably the apple pie would be the iconic taste of America.
And what did they think? What did people back home think?
They loved it.
Hmm.
Russians have a beloved version of apple pie, which is more like a turnover, I guess, Charlotte cake. It's called Charlotte cake, and I have introduced the local community to it. So, I feel that we've traded some culinary inspiration there.
Indeed. And I'll brag again. Lily's a calligrapher, so she's quite adept at fine ink work. So all that's hers. And actually, the Spy Who Loves Me, I think that was a Bond exhibit in
Bond and Beyond.
Bond and Beyond in London.
In London, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, in London. So.
All right, we've got some more. I'm loving all of our questions are fun, so we don't want to skimp. I love the quilt.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah, tell us about, because I love Lily's comment about quilts.
That was very important for me because Mike's mother is a quilter, and her mother and her grandmother were quilters, and we have their quilts at home. So it was very important for me that she passes the craft on to me. And just to set the scene for how enormous that task was, my max is to sew on a button. I'm not a seamstress. I never cared for it. I never had anything to do with stitching, cutting, piecing things together, ornaments. That's just not me. But because I happen to end up in American South, where quilting is part of history, in a family that historically has accomplished quilters, it would be a shame if I didn't try to do something of my own. And this is actually a quilt, truly a scrap quilt made from scraps from fabrics that my mother-in-law used for her projects. So when I completed it and Mike came in to look at the finished work, he was like, "Oh, that was a curtain. That's another quilt." And I remember that one. So it's fun. It truly is family history coming together.
Well, you had a reason why quilting was not big in Russia.
I don't see it ever being big in Russia because it's just too cold and it's a little impractical to spend so much time making something so beautiful, but so, almost ephemeral because, okay, you've made one. What do you do with it now?
I'm saving some of the questions for after this, but a couple of them are relating directly to what we're doing. And one comment, that's a really good looking pie. And it was indeed. And someone else, we saw the library. Folks wanted to know if you would comment on the library image, which was a few back.
Sure. Yeah, I think that was with Lily's.
Yeah.
That happens to be here at the Army Navy Club in Washington, D.C. They have a very well curated military history library. So that happened to be where that photograph was taken. I just thought it was a lovely photo of her.
And I will chime in and say that a library means a lot both to Mike and I. To me, as a Russian/Soviet, everybody had a home library. You could not be an educated family and not have a family library. Considering my dad was an engineer and my mother was a professor in children's literature, we have an amazing collection of children's books and all sorts of literature, both Russian and international, plus some of Dad's books that he used for his building. He was a gyroscopist. He was building navigation systems for planes. So we have some very, very specific books in there, plus art, a few coffee table kind of books, plus my own library, which is understandably English, a little bit of German, a little bit of French, whatever languages I was learning at the time. So library is a big connector for us.
Great. And then you have the sneaky photos, right? We love the
I would say the only photos we have are sneaky. This is the downside of being married to a spy. You don't get photo shoots. You don't get anything but a sneaky photo.
I confess, Lily recommended. I actually had started to arrange a photo shoot, and I wanted to be a gentleman and be polite, but it was just not in my
Mike's
DNA.
Occupational reflex was stronger than my desire to have a photo shoot. So we had to meet halfway, and that's what we have, sneaky photographs.
All right. Anything else you wanted to share with us from the photo gallery?
I think those are good. Just the fishing photo you don't need to focus on, and that's pretty much characterizes my fishing.
Well, why don't you focus on it?
Well, the fish are rarely in danger, but I do enjoy fly fishing.
We keep trying.
We try.
All right. Well, we got a kick out of so many. We were like, these are really cool photos, but there's not a lot of you all together. And Lily said that is what life is like with a former spy. All right. I'm going to turn for a moment over to some of our audience questions, and they're very wide ranging and cool. This was a question for you, Lily. What challenges in the work environment did you experience that you had to overcome?
In the work environment,
I think
well,
they probably mean in Russia.
I would say the biggest challenge for me personally, because I was so wired to work on the international stage with the West. And again, to give a little bit more context, I started learning English when I was 4. Nobody in my family speaks a foreign language. It was just a whim. My parents just decided, in the Soviet Union, with the Iron Curtain, when nobody makes any use of any foreign language whatsoever, but select few, they decided that I should learn English. And that's how my journey started. So being somebody who is very much immersed in the Western background, it's the language, it's the literature, it's everything. Later you get the movies and you absorb that mentality. So for me, I always found it easier to work in an international context rather than in purely Russian companies. I did both. I have more of international background companies and firms in my quiver, but working in a Russian company was a little bit of a challenge. A different mentality, as funny as it sounds, but everybody who ends up as an immigrant is a little bit of a misfit in their own country. So I felt like one. That was a challenge.
This is such a nice question. And it's got one for both of you. Very nice on Valentine's Day. Catherine Ward is saying Russian is such a beautiful language. Mike, do you speak Russian?
That's always a question that gets asked. And the answer is an unqualified no. For two reasons. Lily has been very generous and kind and patient for me to establish some capability to speak the language. But what I feel like it would be such a burden, Lily is starting life with the alphabet. It's like, I just can't make her do that. So what I've tried to do is kind of learn on my own. But
I encourage him to use my Russian background. But when Mike first mentioned to me, when it was already clear that we are a couple and he will have to meet my parents at some point and, travel to the country in a different capacity, he was like, I should probably learn some Russian. And my response immediately, without thinking, which I kind of regret a little bit, was whatever for. I do not see us using Russian as the family language, if you will. So of course it's fine. And it's a beautiful language, which I love. A language has produced so many beautiful texts, so many beautiful pieces of literature and poetry. And that sounds beautiful to me. And I would want to share all that with my husband, but only to the extent he feels comfortable. I would never push for that. And again, in turn, I'm so used to just switching to English that I really do not see a practical purpose behind it. But I will brag on Mike. He has read a lot of Russian literature, and we have watched some Soviet movies that are iconic for the country. So I appreciate that he shares the interest in the culture and that he goes beyond the language to explore it.
We'll get back to those movies in a minute, but the second part of this question, which you mentioned, the wonderful poetry, the wonderful literature, also asking, since we've got a Valentine's Day theme, are there any really great Russian expressions about love or a favorite quote from a Russian author about love? I thought that was
my goodness, I came so unprepared for this one. the only quote that comes to mind, and I will just go ahead and blurt it out, is a Russian idiom that says a husband and wife are one Satan, meaning that a husband and wife are one body, and when people form a family, they start to act as one. And I feel that it's very relatable, both in good and bad, you know, for.
So are you saying husband and wife are one Satan?
Absolutely, that's what I'm saying. Yes, I know it sounds a little weird to an unprepared ear, probably, but this is the one that came to mind. We have a lot of beautiful quotes on love, and if I researched better, I would come up with it. If you asked me for a quote on love in English, I would have failed just as much. So
could we hear the Russian, could we hear the idiom in the original language, or is that?
Absolutely. Муж и жена одна сатана.
I feel like I know more now. Now, this is an easy question because it's a yes or a no.
Okay.
Did you ski as part of school breaks during school?
Yes and no. Skiing is a big part of PE lessons for a Russian kid. I was that frail, ailing kid who hated PE with all my heart, and I did everything to wiggle out of PE lessons. So I don't remember ever owning a pair of skis. And also, again, giving more context, I'm half Jewish. We're not wired for any physical activity. We're not made for it. Just we're not, period. So nobody in my family did any kind of sports or physical athletic activity. Nobody had skis, nobody had a bike. That was just not a thing. We had a library. So for skiing lessons, I vaguely remember my parents borrowing a pair of plastic, yes, you heard it right, plastic skis from somebody, you know, those short little kid kind of skis. And I was miserably failing. And I think I wiggled out of PE lessons pretty soon after. So not many memories for me personally, but yes, that was a big thing for every Russian kid. Still is, I presume. I have a lot of friends who ski. So.
Well, now we asked this a bit earlier, but folks want to circle back. And Mike, were there any professional challenges for you with your relationship with Lily? I think we're all living in the past. Are all of us just living in the past with our ideas about what it's like?
No, and as I joke, and with respect to my counterintelligence colleagues, you know, when all you have is a hammer, all the world's a nail. So when they take that point of view, they're always, you know, suspicious. But it was not. Like I said, I'd left the service. Everything we did was professional, both in my activities in Russia and the interaction with the companies that I was working with. So, but to the point that you asked earlier, we certainly would assume that the intelligence service was being aware of my travels and keeping a watchful eye on things. So, and that's you know, it's kind of the version of it.
Well, here's the flip side of that. Lily, how were you perceived by Americans when you left Russia? Were you accepted?
Mike always scolds me for it. I don't wear my nationality on my sleeve, and I'm lucky to not be perceived as Russian. Now, I'm a patriot of my country. I love it, but I would absolutely hate to carry all the stereotypes with me. So I'm very lucky that, you know, my fluent enough English allows for people to not immediately pin me or earmark me as a Russian. And my favorite game, Mike knows that, is when people ask me, where are you from? I'm like, where do you think I'm from? And I get all sorts of answers. The geography that I cover is very wide, depending on how good my accent is that given day. But in that regard,
what's your craziest? What's the craziest thing that has?
Australia. That was pretty crazy. Yeah, I did not expect that one. And also Scotland once. I got that once. I love Scotland. But that was a little unexpected. Yeah.
I'll jump in if I can on to Lily's credit. She's she's very personable and lovely to interact with. I'll reveal only a tiny regional prejudice. I think the South kind of has a friendly and open demeanor, and so in that sense, she's been very welcomed into the fold in general, I would say.
Yeah, and I will loop back to the actual question about perception and how it worked. So part of it, as I said, is me not being immediately perceived as Russian. Then when people get to know that I'm from Moscow, and it's Moscow, Russia, not Moscow, United States, the immediate reaction usually is, this is not how we imagined you to be. And I go, okay, how did you imagine me to be? And they say, well, you'd be blonde and speak bad English. And I say, sorry, guys, hate to break it to you, things have changed.
Oh my gosh. All right, we're getting to the movie section of our program. As we promised you this would happen, but so tell us, I think it was incredibly charming, the process that you do to share movies that have been important to each other.
Lily has been, I've introduced her to, I'm an old black and white fan. So we watched, we watched all the holiday movies. It's a Wonderful Life. And Lily tears up just like I do for that one, but and I'm trying to think. And we watched all the contemporary romantic movies, Sleepless in Seattle, When Harry Met Sally.
It was actually me introducing you to those.
Yes, that's actually, I had not seen them. So.
Well, speaking for both of us, we had very intense professional life, which did not leave much time for watching movies in either language from either decade. So we're kind of catching up on that. And I appreciate that Mike shares that part of my culture with me. And I absolutely appreciate whoever took the trouble to dub and subtitle all the Russian Soviet movies so that Mike
That's what, because you were telling us that you were taking turns, and if you would share some of the Russian ones that.
Yes, I did. I absolutely did. My all-time favorite is Office Romance. I find it absolutely cute and in many ways relatable. I think for anybody who would want a brief intro to what Soviet life was like, that's a good start. So that was that. Also shared a few of my dad's favorite movies with Mike, and he appreciated those. So we're very slowly moving down the Soviet movie list.
There was one holiday movie, one Russian holiday movie. I was looking at my notes and
The Irony of Fate. That's the one. The Irony of Fate. You shared your impressions. I love how you.
Yeah, it's clever, and when Lily explained it, here's her explanation: is a guy goes out drinking with his buddy and ends up in the wrong apartment, but he thinks it's his apartment
in a different city.
In a different city, and my first thought was, oh, that's very implausible. And then as she explained, and as we both thought through it, with the planned communities and the planned buildings,
planned economy and planned everything.
There's even literally the same street name and the same block number in different cities. And so that was the underlying story behind him actually ending up and his key works in the other apartment. So it's brilliant, and when he moves in. And so that it's a rom-com for sure, but I think traditionally it's a New Year's.
Yeah, it's one of the traditional New Year's
movies. So it was really cute.
The context has changed drastically since then. So even for Russians, those movies stopped being so relatable anymore. Plus, with people becoming more feminist, the male characters now present themselves in a different light. So there is a certain bias toward that age, I would say, but. If you shed all that and just focus on this setup, on how clever it is that really this could happen, that a person would find themselves in a different city, but in a setting so similar that could be mistaken for his own, I would recommend that movie.
One guest wanted to know if Alexander Nevsky was a movie that is familiar with you or one that you two have watched. together.
Haven't watched it. I probably should.
And of course, I ask you about 17 Moments of Spring because we always hear what a touchstone that is. I wonder if, and you haven't watched it? Is that right?
I have
Lily?
watched it.
Yeah, I haven't.
Mike hasn't watched it. I watched it by virtue of this being my father's favorite movie. So yeah, I've watched it. I remember snippets of it, but it was more of a movie just associating with my dad. And I think his love for that movie, he never loved the spy things, but he was a very intelligent man, very educated in many spheres. And he would write to me that, I read this book by Zorge or something else which would resonate with Mike's career and would like to discuss it with him. So yeah, 17 Moments of Spring, big touchstone in Soviet cinematographer history.
So we, ask you if there's anything, Mike, any films that feel really realistic to you. This is a question we always get. Is there a show? Is there a movie that you think really captures the spy's life or the intelligence world or operating in, faraway places?
Yeah, a couple, and this is usually always a question too about for us if we watch The Americans, and I kind of have to disappoint people as
we still haven't.
Lily has not. We'll have to watch it. I have, and I said there's too much killing and too much sex. Not that I'm opposed to romance, but I said that's the part that's implausible for The Americans. But in many ways, the life of the NOC, the non-official cover that they portray in The Americans is well done. As with any film, you have to kind of expand on the realities of it. But that's one I would say, and I'm old school in this regard. Jean Le Carre probably best captures the business of intelligence and espionage, and it's both detailed and sometimes meticulous and tedious. In fact, as a movie, The Night Manager, that was I think it's a 6-part series, I think is a very well represented contemporary example of the genre. Of course, I'm a fan for all the action ones too, as we all suspend belief.
Fun to watch. Well, a question about Anna Chapman, who is one of the Russian 10 who were sent, arrested here and then sent back. And I think she had a kind of exciting career in, as maybe a TV hostess even in Russia. Is she still a thing? Is she still happening? Or the last time you checked, Lily?
I never checked. That will be a pitifully short answer. I never checked. Before ending up married to a case officer, I was never really focused on anything spy. So yeah, of course, you would know the name and you would know that she made somewhat of a career hosting, but that was so far beyond my scope and beyond my reach that I cannot really comment on that.
I will briefly. I think Anna Chapman and the group represented the shift in what non-official cover and how it operates within the U.S. or in other places. In her case and some of the others, they were really agents of influence. They were trying to influence directly or indirectly political dialogue and some direction. So I think that's and again, we definitely don't want to veer into politics, but I think that indicated how a non-official cover agent really kind of their portfolio has expanded. Traditionally, the NOC officer was classic espionage, but using a non-official cover as their means to operate within that environment. So a bit of a change, but now I'm starting to get a little geeky on spy stuff.
No, we're here for the geeky. It's been fun. We've been more Russian immersion than spying out, because I have probably our last question. You know, a guest wants to know, do you ever miss the field? And is there one operation that changed your life? And can you tell us anything about it? Or
Yeah, I do miss the field. That's, as you can appreciate, despite the Hollywood version of it. It's a job where you know every day the importance of what you're doing, as the colleagues, men and women who still serve and did serve. So in that sense, yes, it's very rewarding in that regard. There's tedium. That's why I refer back to LaCar. So you just have to stay on point. Operationally, this is where I have to be vague, but obviously when I had the opportunity to serve the country overseas and was awarded the Intelligence Star, it was an event that was in the news and impacted a lot of people's lives, and sadly there were other American heroes who did not return in that regard. So as with anyone, that shapes and changes your life. But again, it was nothing but an honor to serve in the intelligence community.
well, this has been so much fun. Thank you for being open about. We really usually don't just pry into people's personal lives, but you invited us in, and we thought it would be really fun for Valentine's Day and something a little bit different. And I think everyone, I can tell from the questions, really enjoyed that. And I want to remind our members that they've got a little after chat with us, but our next public program is Spy Chat on Thursday, February 17th. And Deborah Evans-Smith is going to be our guest, and you can register for that on our website as always. And if you're feeling like we're your sweethearts and you want to make a contribution to the Spy Museum, we would sure take that, because, you know, we enjoy doing these programs and bringing them to you free. And so I want to wish everyone a very happy early Valentine's Day, and that everyone stays safe. And any final words from you, Lily and Mike? Anything in Russian?
Wishing everybody happy Valentine's Day in Russian.
Ждем Святого Валентина. That was Happy Valentine's from me.
And
Love it.
and to everyone, and Amanda will know, is I'm a big fan of the Spy Museum. If you haven't been there, you must go. If you've been, you must go again.
If you don't care for spies, you still should go, because it's so great.
Lily liked it, and as she told us, that was not her focus. So
Oh, we should actually tell that Spy Museum encounter.
Do we have a moment, or are we about to hit the hour?
yeah, we have 1 minute.
Go.
I'll be quick. I take Lily to the Spy Museum for the first time. We thought it would be a kick to go to the Spy Museum as we are. So we're going around enjoying all the exhibits. You know, we assume an alias, and so some of the docents would challenge you on your alias. Young man, very earnest, did an excellent job, challenged me, and so then we broke cover and we were just chatting, and he said, "Oh, Washington, if you haven't been here before, it's fabulous. There's spies everywhere." He goes, "If you're really lucky, you may actually speak to a spy.
You may actually see a
spy." And we just didn't have the heart to tell him that I was and she was a Russian.
All my training in the diplomatic academy went to keeping a straight face at that moment.
Maybe I'll even go home with a spy. You never know.
No.
Thank you so much, everyone. Take care. This was so fun.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.